the most encouraging thing about a leader is when he shares something that he did wrong. It's not when he makes conquests and demonstrates how capable he is. It's when he makes a mistake and tells us about it. Or when he confesses one. Maybe it's a sin that he committed. We can relate with him. We believe that he's human. And that he has something to share with us because he can relate with us as well as we can relate with him. It draws our hearts toward him because we now believe he knows how we feel. Jesus shared his vulnerability once. It's a major vulnerability, and he did this at the Garden of Gethsemane, where he prayed, God, I don't like it. I'm having second thoughts about going to the cross. Is there a better way? And when he shared that, I became drawn to him because now he demonstrated to me that he really knows how I feel about certain things, and especially about following God with my entire life. I'm sure that we've all been there where we had second thoughts about something that we committed to. Something that we should do. Maybe we made a pledge to a church building or some sort of church project, and it's now time to pay up. And we go, ooh, maybe I overstated my commitment and I said too much. Lord, how am I going to pay for this or keep my end of the pledge? How do I follow through on that? I made a commitment to share the gospel with my friend, and now it's time, the moment is here. Ooh, but all of this emotions are surfacing, and I'm afraid to bring up the subject. What do I do? What did Nehemiah do? How did he overcome his fear or inhibition? Let's see. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. Okay. Now remember, this is January, and he's been praying since September, and he is still performing his duties all during that time. That was his job. And here, wine, as in a cupbearer, wine could be a synecdoche, which is part for the whole. So if I say, give me the keys, what am I saying? I'm saying, give me the car, or let me take the car, or let me drive. So it's part for the whole. So if wine is part for the whole, he was in charge of everything, as in all the food, everything that was going on, and everything that had to go into the king's mouth. So he hands him the wine. I mean, anybody can hand the king a wine. I mean, it was already brought to him. Why doesn't the servant who brought the wine give it to him? Right? So he is representing the authority that he has of taking care of the king's well-being. And we said a little bit about that, about the reality of a cupbearer. So he was in charge of everything concerning the food. He had to know where it came from, who bought it, how it was prepared, who was preparing it. All of these things. He had to hire the individuals, and he had to monitor them, and they all had to be trustworthy, because if they weren't, then they can slip in poison. They had to be people of integrity. They couldn't be bribed. Because if somebody came with a whole lot of money and said, I will give you this if you slip this in, and nobody will know that it was you who did it. You will be innocent, and then you can live somewhere else rich. So Nehemiah had to make sure that none of his people, anybody who prepared the food, would do that. So it's his responsibility to hand whatever it is, safe as it is, to the king. That was his role. And then we see a transition take place. It said, I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad? When you are not ill, this can be nothing but sadness of heart. Now, of course, Nehemiah had no reason to be sad, whether it be in front of the king or anybody else, until he heard the words from his brother that his people and his city were in distress. So now that he's heard, he has the emotional response. He is praying diligently about it. It was 120 days that he was praying about this situation. And it says that he has never been sad in his presence before. That means he exercised some kind of emotional self-control. In other words, he was a hypocrite. At home, he was diligently praying and crying out to God about what was going on in the city of his ancestors. And then in front of the king, he was just pleasant, cordial, professional, and none of that which was going on in his prayer closet was showing up in front of the king. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, the face had to be lotioned. It had to be totally clear. The conversations that he was having with the king all had to be without any suspicion that there was something going on with him. That's remarkable. And I bet that we live like this every day, but in the wrong way. I bet in front of God, we're all passionate and, we want to serve you. And then in front of other people, especially non-Christians, we live like we're actually in agreement with them. In one form or another, there's a transition that takes place, and we exercise a whole lot of self-control in front of non-Christians that we want to relate with. Parents have to do this with their kids when they're having marriage problems. They turn around and relate with the kids like nothing's going on, but they're trying to beat each other up when they're not around. We have this kind of self-control in our lives that Nehemiah is demonstrating. But he's doing it for a positive reason. This wasn't negative at all. And we have to make sure that if we live like this, we're doing it for the right reasons and not for the wrong ones. The king's response is really more telling than anything else. Because the king was able to detect the true nature of his emotional demonstration. King says, you're not sick, I know that. So this sadness that you're showing has to be something that impacted your heart so deeply. That is amazing. I mean, the king knew Nehemiah. The king knew Nehemiah like he knew his wife. spouses, they know what's going on with one another. So if something's wrong, even if the husband says, no, nothing's wrong, we know there's something wrong. If my wife says, no, nothing's wrong, I go, okay, that's a lie. Because it's written all over your face. It's written, or it's in the way that you told me there was nothing wrong. It's very, very clear there's something wrong. And the king says this can only be something that impacted your heart so much that it depressed you. It highlights the relationship that the king had with Nehemiah and the kind of intimacy that they shared. No wonder he became the cupbearer. Remember, he had to be some kind of special guy because the king did not choose a Babylonian to do this. He chose a Jew to do it. And he trusted the Jew this much. And we will get more into that as the story unfolds. And then the next verse begins like this. I was very much afraid. And then after he said that, of course, more came on. I was very much afraid. But I said to the king, we have to stop right here and we have to camp on this. I was very much afraid. Alright, so we put the brakes on the rest of the passage. We're going to stop right here. And the reason why we have to stop right here is because, and as they say in the media, stop the presses. You know what that means. Right in the middle of the printing of the newspaper, the guy who makes the decision, the guy who's in charge, says stop. And the reason why you have to stop is because what just came to light needs to be printed. Stop the printing because the rest of it is going to be trash. We're going to have a new printing, and this is what needs to get out. That's how serious this is. We have to stop the presses when it says, I was very much afraid. Nehemiah was afraid. Is this the same Nehemiah of chapter 1? Same Nehemiah? Surely it must have been a different Nehemiah who said, I was very much afraid. Fear is so common that we don't even notice it. I bet the first time we read this, we go, okay, it's going to be this. And we didn't even notice. Why? Because you and I are just like this. Fear is so natural. It's common. So, of course he feared. Alright, let's move on. And that's what we did with the text. Everybody's afraid of something or someone, so okay, it's common, let's go. No big deal, right? Just go on. Just move on with life. Okay? No. This is a major deal. And we have to camp on this because it's a major deal. But I don't know, and this is my suspicion, I don't know if Nehemiah intentionally wrote this and said, I need to express how I felt and I was fearful because it's so significant. No. I think he was just telling his story and how he remembered it and just put that in there. That's just a natural thing. He didn't think about the consequences of writing that. He didn't think about, well, this is going to be the emphasis when people read this. I don't think it was intentional at all. I think it was just a natural part of his telling his story because this is how it was. And if we treat that as how it was, then we would just be glossing over that and not really learning from what he was saying. And not really getting the emphasis of what God was saying. Because fear is a major deal. As a matter of fact, as I was reflecting over this message, I said, I gotta stop right here. I can't even go on. I wanted to do all 10 verses of it, but I can't. Because it's necessary to get a full grasp of what is happening here. And fear itself, the subject itself, we could address in a number of verses, of messages. So this is a major deal. And Nehemiah reveals that even a leader deals with this. Even a strong leader deals with this. Even an exemplary leader deals with this. This autobiography is really, really telling. And we have to wonder, because when we see chapter 1, especially at the end, we think, what? That's inconsistent with his character. At the end of chapter 1, it says, grant me favor in front of this man. Remember? We understood his perspective that the king was a man and God was sovereign and he controls this guy. And so there is nothing that he can't ask for in terms of turning the heart of the king. And he knew that from Scripture too. Then why is he afraid? God is sovereign. What could possibly happen to him? What could the king possibly do to him? The king could fire him. Hey, I don't need that kind of emotion, man. I have enough problems and stress in my kingdom. You get depressed, you keep that stuff at home. Don't give me that sad face business. You know, I don't need to deal with that, especially while I'm eating. You know, we certainly don't talk about stuff while we're eating. We don't talk about excrements when we're eating, right? We don't talk about flatulation when we're eating. Please. You know, none of that, right? Your parents correct you, your little teenagers. Oh man, guess what I heard? And all this joke is nope. Well, we're eating, please. Don't talk about gory stuff, don't talk about this, don't talk about, and in front of the king especially, sad stuff. Leave it alone. He could be jailed. The king could jail him for that. I mean, people were jailed for less. Joseph was jailed and he was innocent. Didn't do anything. His wife accused Joseph and so landed in jail. I mean, a number of things. He could be flogged. He could be executed. I mean, the king is sovereign over his life. So he could have been afraid of all of these things. But that's not the Nehemiah of chapter 1. He knew that God was sovereign. He can turn the heart of the king. He didn't have to be afraid of anything. That's just the way he felt. Some things we are just afraid of, and we don't have any basis for it. No basis for our fear. Like, demons going to possess me and take over my life. If you're not a Christian, that fear would be legitimate, because a non-Christian can be possessed by a demon. But a Christian can never be possessed by a demon because the Holy Spirit lives inside. There's no more room. It's like the guy playing, with marshmallows. Chubby Bunny or something. You keep sticking marshmallows in your mouth until your mouth is full, and every time you put one in, you have to say Chubby Bunny, right? 7, 8, 9, maybe 9 of them are in there, and you recover. If you can't say Chubby Bunny, then you stop. That's your count. But you can't shove any more in there after that. You can't shove 20 marshmallows in your mouth. Especially, okay, you can't shove 50. I guess nobody can go there. All right. You just can't. The Holy Spirit inside, you can't. So that fear is illegitimate. Totally. And it is illegitimate for us to fear that we're going to lose everything. House, everything. There is no possession anymore, just the clothes on our back, and then we have to go and beg for our sustenance. That's totally illegitimate too, because Psalm 37 verse 25 says that I was young and now I'm old, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their children begging bread. Just doesn't happen. Some fears are illegitimate, but other fears are actually legitimate. We actually have legitimate fears that, if we experience it, would make us or pain us in one way or another. I could get in a car accident. That's a legitimate fear. I could die, I could be paralyzed. Totally legitimate. That could happen. I could get mugged, I could be shot. I could get fired, I could lose my job. You know. There's a possibility that I would never get married. You know, people are afraid of that. When I was young and not married, I was afraid of that. So maybe, hey, what if I never got married? Legitimate fear. What if I never got healed? Whatever disease or whatever illness I had, what if I never get healed? That's a legitimate fear. And parents fear this. What if I let my kids go on a mission trip? What if they never come back? That's a legitimate fear. What if I become a missionary and I get martyred? That's a legitimate fear. That could happen. What if I share the gospel with my friend and I lose my friendship? And all of our mutual friends also abandon me. That's a legitimate fear. Alright, so there's illegitimate fear, there's legitimate fear, but what if all of those things did happen? Let's think about that. If those things actually happened and we got fired, we didn't get healed, we didn't grow any taller than our own height. Right? Oh man, I don't want to be short all my life. 5'6", dang. What if you never did get tall? What are we afraid of? Well, let's look at the other perspective. Let's look at the other perspective. If I am afraid of something, what does it do to me? If it never happened, what does it do to me? Nothing. If it doesn't happen, nothing happens. I'm just afraid emotionally. Maybe I'm paralyzed, I won't do anything. But in terms of physically, it's just an emotion. Unless it happens, it's just an emotion, so we can still deal with it. What we need to do is actually trace out our fear and see what actually happens. What if God takes our fear and uses it for His glory? Whatever we're being afraid of, whatever that situation is, then the fear would have been useless. Let's say God uses our child's tragic death to glorify Himself by calling all of these people to a greater relationship with Him. What if God takes your job and gives you another job. Not necessarily better in terms of money, but better in terms of the way that you feel about working. Because many people have taken the harder route of going or trying to get a degree as a doctor, and God changed their minds and made them either missionaries or pastors or something else that gave them greater satisfaction than what they thought would benefit them. They had to disappoint some people along the way for it, but it was better. What if God used the stuff that we thought we should be afraid of and used it for His glory? Would that make the situation better? Absolutely. Absolutely. If He can turn that stuff around, if He can take our fears and turn it around, it would be for His glory. And that's what we ultimately want, isn't it? Isn't it that we want to take whatever God dishes out to us and for us and cooperate with Him in such a way that it brings Him glory, no matter what it does to us? For the sake of His name, for the sake of His glory, we say yes. But that's not what we do normally. That is not how we cooperate, what we do in response to Him. We want to run away from all of that. We don't like it. We don't want to experience it. We don't think about the glory of it. We just run away from it. And when we run away from it, we miss out on what God could do with that situation for us. What does fear actually do? Fear is actually an instrument of control. It's been happening in our neighborhood. My neighbor does this with his children. And it hasn't been happening recently, which is really remarkable. I think things are changing with him. But the father is a domineering father. He doesn't know how to influence his kids without yelling. It's just anger. And sometimes it's just, we can hear it from down the street. There are two of my neighbors do that. Right? You know, it's public information because everybody hears it. So he screams at his kids. I mean, vicious anger screams, like he's about to do something nasty, break an arm or something. And the kids are, of course, very much afraid. And what do? They comply. They are controlled by fear. And he uses fear to master his environment. It doesn't matter. And everywhere we go, if we analyze what we do, there's an element of fear in it. We're doing this because we fear it. We're doing this because we fear. We're doing this. I'm doing this because I fear this, that, and the other thing. Almost everything that we do because of fear. And it's a very, very easy thing to use to control us. I was afraid to share with you this example because of what it might do. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm talking about fear. I'm teaching on fear. I am addressing this reality of fear. Why am I afraid to bring it up? So I'm going to bring it up. the way that the government wants to control us is with fear. So the government does that, and I'll give you an example of that. The pharmaceuticals do that. Kids do that. Well, everybody does that, but especially people in authority do that, because if they want to get their way, they have to tell you that something's going to happen, okay? And I realized this early on when I had to decide whether to vaccinate my kids. And some of you doctors are just going to go, woo. Okay, but I'm just giving you an example. I spoke to a friend of mine who had done all this research, got this information, and he handed it to me, and I said, read this, and tell me, what you think, and you can decide what to do. Because I was trying to find out, well, should I, vaccinate my kids or not? So I read the information, and I said, whoa, what is this? And I read it, and my wife is a nurse. She's all into that. My brother is a doctor. He's an anesthesiologist. My sister-in-law is a psychologist. She's a doctor too. Okay. So anyway, there it is. I read the information and I said, hey, I don't need to. And in some countries, some of these things are not even used. They got rid of MMD, measles, mumps, diphtheria vaccine. They don't even do it. Japan doesn't do it. Other countries don't do it. They looked at the research and they said, hey, we don't need that. So if my kids get the mumps, so what? If they get the measles, so what? And I thought, they think that if I don't do it, I'm going to kill my kids. And that's how they're controlling me. My kids are going to die if I don't do this. That's what they want to say. Because, remember, pharmaceuticals make money. And if they make money on it, they want all the doctors to prescribe it. So I said, I'm being controlled by fear. Okay. If I had to make a decision based on knowledge, then would the risks be worth it? Long story short, I said no. So I said, I'm not vaccinating my kids. And then I told my wife, she was in tears. Because she was already in that mode of thinking, I'm going to lose my kids. It took a while for her to get to the point where, okay, we're going to depend on the Lord and not some lie or propaganda. So I didn't. So all my kids are not vaccinated. You need to be vaccinated to go to school. So we couldn't send our kids to school, but we didn't want to send our kids to school anyway. We homeschooled them. So that wasn't even relevant. If they go to a foreign land and with a mission organization, they require, all right, you need to get the malaria vaccine. Okay? If the Lord called them to do so, and they required it, and we couldn't opt out, because if we can't opt out, we would. If we can't do it, then I would let them. Okay? But I was not going to be controlled by fear. And I realized that I don't have to be. And according to the law, I had to cooperate with the law, of course. Okay? But the clause is there that I can opt out based on my convictions. Right? And then, even more telling than that, when I saw the 9/11 footage and research and all of that stuff, there was no way the two buildings could come down just by a fire. As a matter of fact, it is impossible for a fire to bring down a steel reinforced building. It happened only during 9/11. no other time has a building come down because of a fire. Then subsequent fires afterwards in buildings destroyed 26 stories of it with fire, almost burned everything inside of it. Still stood up. So the only way that the buildings could come down is either an explosion, demolition, right? They had to use plasma torches, because plasma torches goes right through metal. Or this thing called thermite, which obliterates metal. Right? So those are the three possibilities. That means if there were the only three possibilities, then it had to be an inside job. Somebody had to get into the building to do that. And I said, you know, Osama bin Laden didn't even claim that he did that. He never even claimed that he sent pilots to the building. He never. See, if you do something dramatic and you want to send a message, you would actually claim it. Like people would easily claim that I killed somebody just to get the fame or whatever. He never did it. And if he was after the United States, so if it wasn't Osama bin Laden, then who was it? It had to be an inside job.
What does this have to do with the Bible?
Hang on. I'll get it. Okay. Thank you. So then, what happened? And I'm not trying to belabor this. It is an appropriate illustration for what I'm talking about. Then what happened? If we trace this out, then it had to be somebody who had the capability of doing this, and then we'd have to ask why. The only conclusion that we can come to, it had to be authoritative. It had to be on a level that had high authority. That means we can only come to the conclusion that somehow the government was involved in it. If this is true, and my conviction is, then why did they do it? It is, did you know that afterwards there were over $4 trillion spent on all the infrastructure and all the policy changes that took place because of that? They had to have a reason to dramatically do everything. Otherwise, nobody would have cooperated with that. $4 trillion is more than 3 times the gross national product. And I thought, wow, somebody's pulling the strings. And I said, this is something to be afraid of. And then when I shared this with a student, he said to me, why do you still live in this country if you think that this is the case and the government is manipulating you? I said, because God has not called me anywhere else. If He calls me to go somewhere else, then I would. But just because of fear, I'm not going to move. When I'm going to serve the Lord where I'm planted, whether it harms me or not. See, if Jesus could have used that excuse, He could have said, well, you know, they're going to kill me, crucify me. I'm not going there. What did He say? He said, the Pharisees are going to kill me. They're going to flog me and put me on the cross, but I'll be raised on the 3rd day. He is going to the cross instead of away. He is not allowing fear to drive Him, manipulate Him, control Him. It doesn't matter what you're afraid of. Don't let it control you. What did Nehemiah do? He said, I was very much afraid. And then what did he do? Opened his mouth. He didn't say, never mind. Sorry, I'll get over it. He shared with the king who could kill him, destroy him. It doesn't matter what you fear. God is still sovereign. You don't have to be controlled by fear. You can have fear, yes, but don't let it control you. Nehemiah is being honest. He's saying, here, I'm a leader. I'm number 2 man in Babylon. But I still have fear. But I'm not going to let fear control me. I was thinking, well, what kind of response am I going to get if I share this? I was very much afraid. But I said, I can't let fear control me. I have to let everybody know the truth. Because I have to live like that too. You and I have to live like this. No matter what you're afraid of, you can be afraid. It's not a sin to be afraid. It's a sin to allow fear to control you other than God. Then we have to ask ourselves, what do we fear and what is controlling us because of it? Are you willing to let your fear go and say, Lord, I will let you do whatever you want in my life? As a matter of fact, when you go home, and I wanted to do this here, but we're going to save a little time. I'm going to give you the instruction and then ask about it. When you go home, ask yourself, God, am I willing to say, whatever you do, whatever you call me to do, I will do. Whatever you tell me to say, I will say. I will do what you command me. I will give you a blank check. So send me, tell me, whatever it is, I will do. Are you willing to do that? Or will you not do that because you're afraid of something? God's going to send me here. He's going to tell me to talk to that. He's going to tell me to give away this. Are you willing to do that? Or are you afraid of something? Will God punish you or do something to you if you say yes, and He has something nasty for you to do? What if He does use you as a martyr? Will you be afraid of that? Is fear controlling you? Ask yourself, if you can't handle that, okay? If you can't say to God, there's so many things that I fear, I can't give you a blank check. I can't say, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. Wherever you tell me to go, I'll go. I can't do that. Then use that as a reason to seek the Lord and communicate with Him and dialogue with Him. Say, right now I'm afraid, how do I overcome this? How? How do I have a better relationship? How do I really let go and live by your voice rather than fear? How? Show me. I want to have a better relationship with you. And I don't want to be controlled by fear. Don't let me. Let me be like Nehemiah. Let me be like Jesus. Let's pray together. Father, it doesn't matter who is more powerful than we are on planet Earth. Whether it be the government, the pharmaceuticals, our own principal or teacher or parents, our company, there are a number of authorities that are higher than we are. And so many people can manipulate us. They can control us by fear. And if they can control us by fear, then you don't have control over us. And that would be a shame. Father, I pray that you would stir in us a holy resistance to be controlled by fear. And no matter what we learn, and no matter what we understand, no matter what we believe, if something other than you is pulling our string, help us to resist it. Let us say no to everything else and yes to you. Thank you for challenging us and for calling us to a greater commitment. You deserve better. And we want to glorify you with our response. I hope everybody wants to glorify you with their responses. I pray that that will be a reality and that we would shake the planet because you choose to use us as you chose to use Nehemiah, as you chose to use Daniel and his buddies, as you chose to use our Lord Jesus.